This is a Platinum Explosion special where myself and Ciaran are replaying The Last of Us and discussing our adventure ahead of The Last of Us Part 2. Today we're talking about the Lakeside Resort and Bus Depot chapters. So this chapter begins with the Twitch meme of the bunny getting an arrow for it. I don't know who the Twitch streamer is.
I don't know who she is either. I know the meme very well, but I had no idea who the actual streamer is.
I don't know. In case if you don't know what we're talking about, there is a clip of some streamer, this girl, and she's like, I'm very upset, obviously coming off the part where Joel's nearly dead, and it cuts to, and she's already like crying, and then she's like, the rabbit appears on the screen, she's like, it's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life, and then the arrow goes through it, she goes, ah! Don't know who it is. I'm sure you've seen it. It's funny though. It's a funny clip. So that's how this chapter begins, and then for the majority of chapter, we begin playing Ellie. Now, before I want to get into the rest of it, I was just going to ask, because obviously we played the DLC before this, but do you remember the first time playing it? If it was like,
I remember how special and how like holy crap this section was. Like just being like, holy crap, I'm playing as Ellie first. It's like such a big thing. But I think even just the start of this section with hunting the deer and stuff feels so different from the rest of the game that it almost it feels different, and it feels like it's got this other kind of flow to it. I think all of Ellie's, it's really interesting the gameplay difference between playing Ellie and Joel throughout this whole thing, where Joel, for many parts, you just feel like a one-man army, that nothing's stopping you from finding this girl and saving her. Whereas Ellie's section, where Ellie is almost like a one-man army, she's like full, like John Rambo. Like she is just like sneaking around, taking people out, avoiding people if she can. Like just being like that whole like blizzardy section later in this chapter is just so much fun to play. But there's such a difference in gameplay that really kind of makes it worth having two different characters playing through the section.
Yeah, I in a lot of ways I feel like this is my favorite chapter, just because you get it's like its own secluded sort of story where there's this bad guy present for this particular section, and then you got this cool switch back and forth between the characters eventually, and it builds up the tension, and it's just this alone seems like it could be the plot of a movie, just this sort of section kind of thing, before it gets back on track. It's interesting. So at the start of this, obviously, as you mentioned, you track down the deer, which it stood out to me only because of how weirdly designed it was, like especially because I played Rise of Tomb Raider early in the year, and it was like, in that you're actually hunting animals, and in this you're not really hunting an animal, you just have to hit it to trigger it to go to this spot, and then hit it to get triggered to go to this spot, and then when you hit it, the game makes it run up that alleyway and jump over the fence, and like it's not really hunting, it's just kind of triggering a gameplay series of events. So she hunts it, she manages to shoot a couple times with arrows, and then you track it down to this abandoned coal mine where it's laying dead on the ground. Two strangers appear from behind something, and they're holding. Do they hold a gun? No, they just pop out. And they're like, "Hey!"
They come out holding their hands up.
Yeah, she straight away pulls a bow on them though, and they're revealed to be David and James. David explains that he wants to trade for some of the meat, and Ellie says the only way she would offer any of it is if they've got medicine. So then David sends James back to their base to get medicine, and David stays there with Ellie to watch over the dead body of the deer, the meat, the prize we've got here. So while they're in the building, they get attacked by a whole bunch of infected. They manage to survive after you do this massive battle, which obviously isn't very hard for. I know we've mentioned it several times now, but it wasn't very hard on easy compared to obviously.
I think this, especially for this episode of chapters, like I remember, because this is like the penultimate part of the game. This is kind of the last kind of really major blocks of fighting that you do for most of it. There's
one more part that's supposed to be really hard in the underground part.
Yeah, but for me, it's really funny because I remember part of me was kind of dreading jumping back to Joel, because I always remember the trek after Joel wakes up being a lot longer and a lot harder. and it really wasn't that much gameplay, but I just don't know why. I just had this kind of this feeling of just, there's this massive chunk of just fighting going on. And I think I've just had that in my mind for most of this playthrough, because I'm just so used to having to be way more methodical and planning and stressed about combat in this game compared to what it is on easy, where I'm just like loaded to the brim with items and I'm just.
I will say, I actually died the most in this Ellie and David section that I did in the entire game. And in
the holding the little room section, I died
the holding the room. I died twice. Yeah,
because like random freaking clickers would just come out and bite me, and I'd be like, oh fuck. Okay,
I got twice by one just running up, or like there's at one point one drop from each side of the windows, and I thought I had it down pat.
Exactly the same.
I'm just watching one window, then one drops down and kills me from behind.
Exactly the same as me. 100%. The other one comes up, just starts biting into me. I'm like, oh yeah, shit.
Another time I'm just shooting this other dude coming up one end of the stairs, and apparently a clicker snuck in behind the other end to me somehow. I don't know. But yeah, so in a lot of ways, this was the hardest part on easy apparently, because this is where I died the most. Twice trying to do that damn holding the section. So you survive all that, and then Ellie starts somewhat bonding with this David person, because they have a bit of chit chat back and forth. At first, she's very aggressive towards him, and like shut up, like whatever, I'll help you. You got to help me, whatever. And by the end of it, you feel like she's kind of let her guard down a little bit. And I wouldn't say she feels like she could fully trust him, but it definitely feels like she's a bit more like, oh, maybe he's okay.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And can I say, even though he's a terrifying douchebag in this role, this is maybe one of my favorite Nolan North performances.
I reckon he's unrecognizable, personally.
I know it's
him, and I still can't pick him. So
yeah, it's one of those characters, just the character that you're like, if you tell somebody who just doesn't know that's Nolan North, they're like, wait, you mean Nathan Drake Nolan North? It's like, yeah, it's like, dude's got fucking acting chops and range, man. Like, it's just so sinister and creepy, especially in the later half of this section, that is just very unsettling.
Yeah, very much. And yeah, it's one of those things where I kept trying to pick out little, because sometimes certain actors, voice actors especially, if they say a certain word or something, you'll be like, that was Nolan North kind of thing. But the entire time, I just could not pick anything as he's playing David that sounds like the normal Nolan North isms or speech or anything. Yeah. So as peace returns and they've killed a shit ton of infected and clickers and whatever else, David then starts talking about a crazy man with a young girl who murdered a bunch of his people at the university. Dun, dun, dun. It's revealed that all of the people at the university and just before then who were all part of the same gang, they're all from David's group. So there you go. Ellie pulls out a weapon at this point. James appears with the meds around the corner, and David actually just tells James to let her have them, and she takes off. James is very much like, they're not going to like this. So it seems like, and you never get a full understanding of David's dichotomy in the town leadership type thing, but it seems like he's obviously one of the high ups, but not like
somebody
the
that's
boss.
Well trusted. Yeah. I think on my first playthrough, I very much got the feeling that he was the boss, and then on this playthrough, it was like, oh no, there's a lot more kind of a different kind of hierarchy than I understand in this community or people. I think this is the villainous stupid point of the arc for David, especially, where everybody, the equivalent of the stereotype of a villain saying his monologue long enough for the hero to escape, it's giving Ellie the meds to go and get Joel and make Joel feel better.
I think it's just he did it to track her to find Joel.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Fair enough.
In mind,
that does make sense. That does make sense. Okay.
Yeah. Instead of just capturing her because he's just spent all this time with her, I like to think that he's like, even if I take her, she's not going to tell me where Joel is, probably. So it's easier just for me to let her go and then go round them both up in one foul swoop kind of thing. And I think he understands how much David understands how lethal Ellie can be when you see the amount of people he sends to collect a little girl and an old man, so that's a proving point. But yeah, so it's sometime later the next day we cut to I think it's like the next morning type situation.
You get the feeling that she slept for the night.
Yeah, because she returns to Joel, gives him the meds, whatever it is. It clears him up either way, and then she wakes up and David's meds. Was it medicine?
It's penicillin as well.
Magic penicillin. Magic penicillin.
It's like instant reaction. Like, man.
Yeah. It's pretty fast.
Part of it is like, okay, it's pure adrenaline after that point. Like, the penicillin's done, it's starting to its job, but the adrenaline is what's pushing Joel through the actual pain of the cut and everything still.
Nasty looking cut too. So David's men have tracked Ellie, and so then she takes off in an attempt to drive David's men away. She rides horseback through the town, big action sequence, they're all shooting at her. Eventually she ends up being knocked off the horse, and then you do this action scene where you either sneak through or go Rambo style, freeze a bunch of houses and fight a bunch of men. I was still doing it stealth because I just find it more fun to just try and do it stealth, I guess, even though I find it more fun.
I find it, for me, very much in that roleplay aspect of it, I guess, or the narrative, is that I'm like, well, Ellie kind of has to be a little bit more stealthy, you know? I use the bow way more on Ellie than I do on Joel, because Joel is at the point in the game where he's a walking armory. Yeah. Like, you just have that many weapons.
Weapons hanging off you.
Just like you have that much stuff that you're like, I'm good to go.
One thing I do like is when they split them up, but it's how they don't give him all the guns. Like, she has a couple, and then he has a couple too that were left behind or whatever, so they kind of split between them.
And also, there's also like the Left Behind DLC explains where she got a bow from, because you kind of at this point of the game. I remember thinking when I initially played this, oh, that's Joel's bow that she's just taken to go hunting with, and then you kind of realize, wait, no, they're both using a bow at the same time. Okay, sure, whatever. So it kind of, that does fill it in.
We got her bow last week in the
exactly in the Left Behind DLC. Yeah.
After she sneaks through these sections for a while, she ends up being knocked out by David though, and taken to his town and locked away as a prisoner. We then cut back to Joel, who wakes up to find there's still some of David's men looking for him. He manages to take out a few of them and then take two of them in for quote unquote questioning, but more or less torturing, because he manages to get Ellie's location out of them, which is the important piece of information. But also this scene is another big piece of the pie towards what kind of person Joel is, in that he not only tortures them with zero fucks or care, but then he does it brutally. And then even when he gets information he wants, there's not a single piece in him that's willing to let them go. And that shot of him just being like, yeah, cool, what it, bang, like shoots the dude in the head. It's that, and
just be like, yeah, I trusted Joel. Him. I trusted the first guy. Like, I knew the first guy was telling me the truth. I don't actually need you.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, there's something about this second playthrough, and I don't know what it is. I think it's just having a second playthrough. It's like I did a second playthrough of The Walking Dead Season 1 that I'm continually comparing these two because of the relationship between the two main characters. Man, I love Joel even more in this game. Like, there's not even that much of me being like... I remember the first time being like, holy shit, Joel, you are... No, I'm like, no, this dude is a man on the mission. Like, this is just... He won't let anything kind of get in his way. He's just gonna smash through it, and it's I like that in a character. I like it in a main character because it makes him so different from many other main characters that are, you know, that kind of run-of-the-mill goody two-shoes that runs by the law and everything that we get a dime a dozen of. I think this kind of shows a very gritty and more realistic kind of man that's survived for 20 years in this apocalyptic wasteland.
It's funny you say that because I feel like my time playing my second time playing the game, and what I'm realizing more and more, and we'll probably discuss it more when we talk about the final section next week, is I'm just more and more deciding that Joel is just the bad guy. Like, he is, and not to say I don't enjoy that, because it's I'm feeling similar to Joel in the same way I kind of feel about watching Breaking Bad, where the main character that is actually goes from
the bad guy.
The whole structure of Breaking Bad is literally taking someone who sets out with good intentions and is originally a good guy doing bad things but for good reasons, and by the end of that show he's just a straight up villain. And I feel like a lot of the time I've spent in the second playthrough, I'm feeling very similar to Joel. And we can pin in that because I definitely feel like that's a lot more relevant to talk about when we get to the next week, obviously. But yeah. So then we cut back to Ellie, and David's been trying to talk her into, giving up Joel and joining them and blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. And
he starts getting even creepier.
Starts getting even creepier, and things get even weirder when Ellie starts realizing that there are dead bodies all around, and they are definitely cannibals. I mean, they definitely, and that's one thing I kind of don't like about this segment, because I just feel like it's the stereotypical zombie movie where people turn into cannibals stereotype, which seems to happen in literally every zombie story ever. There's always one group who turn into cannibals.
But that's because I think it's kind of, even though it is a stereotype, I think it's kind of, sadly, it's like a very almost realistic thing you could see happening of some people at that point, like 20 years in after everything's happened. Like,
turn vegetarian at that point, surely.
Some people just done that, especially in America. I can see Americans doing that 100%. Like, especially these kind of, not to single any place out, but especially Southern kind of people, I could see them doing that, turning to that kind of measure, because they shouldn't have to stop eating meat. Would there be their kind of thing?
Americans more likely to be cannibals? ExplosionNetwork.com. What a quote.
in a very extreme situation, not easily turned, saving my butt a little bit there.
So she manages to, when he comes in and talks to her later, he's like, that's it, I've had enough, given up trying to help you out here and talk you into joining our group. And him and James take her out of her prison cell thing. They put her up on the table, and they're pretty much about to cut her arm off, is what it seems like, when she uses her bite as a way to distract them, because she pulls down her sleeve and says, look, I'm infected. Now you're infected because I've bit you, or she scratched him or whatever earlier, and all this sort of stuff. And it's enough of a distraction that he starts questioning and talking with James, and given all that, Ellie manages to grab and kill James quickly, like with the axe thing or whatever that was there, the cleaver.
With like a cleaver.
And then she manages to run out the door, grab a knife, jump out a window, and you then spend this next section crawling around in the snowy town as David's out looking for you, and he's got his men chasing after you as well. I nearly died in this section, actually, because I got seen once and this person started shooting at me, and I just ran towards him and managed to survive the last amount of health. By the time
I had a yikes moment where I crawled into, like, I think it was like a comic book store or a bookstore of some kind, and I didn't actually look in the door, and I walked through, and it was just a moment of me stood there and two guys just stood immediately looking at me, and I was like, oh fuck, like, whoops. And luckily you could kind of cheese the AI a little bit, where you kill two, and then when the person comes up running over, you can kind of just hide until you get around them and just, stealth kill them. But yeah, it's an interesting portion.
It is. Eventually she manages to make her way to this, I was going to say a bar. It's like
a steakhouse. It's a steakhouse.
Yeah, there you go. I was about to say a restaurant, but yeah, steakhouse is probably right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you have this boss fight, and I've wrote it down as really the only real boss fight in the entire game, which is interesting considering it's not the end of the game or anything.
I don't know if it's just it being on easy, but even just everything about this boss fight was just, like, it was really quick, but I remember it being so much tenser. Normally,
I think it's because I knew what to do. And
I also knew to, like, avoid plates and to, like somehow, I think when I first went in there, I managed to walk around. I didn't know that you had to, I couldn't remember that you had to go to the front door to trigger the actual boss fight starting. So I literally walked around the entire restaurant first. So I kind of was like, oh, I know where all the plates are and stuff. Cool. All right. I know where to grab a bottle from to distract him. Cool. And then I was like, oh, okay, whoops. You go out. And it was just very simple. Yeah, like maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Like, yeah,
it didn't take me long. I think a lot of that is knowing what to do. And that means not wasting time trying to figure out what to do. Whereas the first time you are in any boss fight, really, where you don't know the enemy's weakness in any sort of game, unless it's straight up Call of Duty where it's like, shoot the fucking person. But for this type of thing, you're trying various things like, do I throw the bottle at his head? do I do this? Do I not do that? But going in being like, the only way to hurt him is I have to distract him and then shiv him. That's, there's no fucking around, which speeds up the whole process. And maybe playing on easier means that he was less likely to spot you.
Receptive or something?
Maybe, but I honestly just feel like the boss, I feel like it'd be the same on any difficulty. Maybe he'd do more damage if he actually hit you, but I didn't get seen once, so whatever. Anyway, it's a fine boss fight, but it's, simple design. It works better the first time, I feel, because obviously going to be more tense and stressful. I think not knowing what to do and crawling around and whatever else. But after you manage to stab him a couple times, they both get knocked out and fall to the ground. You then cut back to Joel, who's just arriving at the town. And see, this is where I like all this stuff, because he's arriving. You got all these people on alert. You fight your way through the town, and then you see the building on fire where Ellie's knocked out, and then it cuts back to Ellie. Like, a lot of this just seems more cinematic. Yeah,
and it's even stuff like the guards talking as they're kind of running into position to being like, oh, the infected one, we need to find her, like blah blah blah, And it's just very, as the audience, you've got that meta knowledge, you understand what they're talking about, but Joel in that situation doesn't. So it's it's a really good section. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Then we come back to Ellie, and she wakens back up, and she begins trying to crawl for the machete. David tries to stop her and begins taunting her as he gets on top of her. Ellie manages to hit him with the end of the machete after she quickly grabs it, and then she gets on top of him and pretty much goes to town on, I presume, slicing his face into 1,000,001 bits as Joel eventually arrives and stops her and gives her a hug in an attempt to calm her down. I remember the first time playing it, finding that whole David's section super distressing. Obviously, I knew it was going to turn out okay this time because I know what's happening. But I just think the implication that they ride that fine line of just really implying that David was probably going to do some
messed up stuff.
Fucked up shit to Ellie. So and I think in an interview, someone asked Nolan North. I can't remember the official word for it. There's an official word for the type of predator that David is, that Nolan reckons is what Neil Druckmann told him or whatever for the direction. And it's basically someone who's into specifically girls aged 12 to 14 type thing. There's apparently an official name for that or something, but that's the kind of predator apparently he was supposed to be playing. Imagine being that your direction though. Not only are you potentially playing a rapist, Nolan North, but there's very specifically one with these fucked up intentions. And just play this scene where you're gonna possibly do horrible things to her. It's really weird considering he plays a hero character all the time. And
it's such a massive leap away from that character and everything.
You think you know me? Huh? Well, let me tell you something. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Ellie! Stop!
Fucking touch me!
It's okay. It's me. Look. It's me.
He tried to...
Oh, baby girl. It's okay.
No.
It's okay.
Can I say, Joel kind of hugging her and calling her baby girl and stuff in this section? Oh, I'm God, my heart melted a little bit. I'm
it's the most. I think that section, especially him being hey, baby girl, and all this sort of stuff. I think it's the most sign we've got so far in the game that he's kind of adopting Ellie as his new daughter because that's obviously what he was calling Sarah at the start of the game. So they drop lots of little specific things, and it's purposely saying baby girl, because he could say something else, but that's supposed to be a surefire hint. So the next section of the game is kind of short, I think. On memory, I think it took half an hour.
I actually thought this was longer than I remembered.
I did too. I was surprised.
There's a whole section that my brain just didn't remember.
I think it's longer because the fight at the end took me a very long time playing it on normal difficulty.
Do you mean like the
In the
last-
underground.
in the underground? This fight, right. So I felt very overall for this section throughout this whole thing. I felt so cathartic throughout the whole thing because I knew where we were going. I knew what we were leading to. This is the most purest relationship moment between Joel and Ellie is leading up. And then at the same time, in the same section, I had this moment of revenge where I ran out to the two bloaters and just like went to town with everything I had on me, like flamethrowers and everything, because I was like, I know this is the last infected section of the game. Like there's no more infected except for one little bit after this point in the game. So I was like, say hello to my little friend, like throwing Molotovs and just like spraying everything with flamethrowers. It was really fun because I remember that really sucked. That last little section, especially with the two bloaters and the whole bunch of clickers, was the worst.
Yeah, I remember that taking me forever because it was quite hard. That's why whenever people like talk about beating this game on harder difficulties, I'm like, yeah, not for me, dude. No, thank you. Anyway, so it says spring, so we skip ahead a month. Could be long, like it could be 2-3 weeks. I don't know. Either way, it's sometime later. Spring now. Joel and Ellie are arriving in Salt Lake City, and straight away you can kind of see the hospital off in the distance where the Fireflies are supposed to be, and that's your goal. So straight away playing this chapter, it's very like end game territory. Here we go, hospital. Let's get into there. And you constantly like. I remember the first time playing it being like, yeah, okay, what's gonna happen? Like that type of thing. And I think that's why the giraffe thing works so well in a moment, because you're constantly like, what's going to go wrong? And that's the first thing that kind of happens in the chapter, because after you make through these first few bits, I think the other thing obviously to point out is Ellie is psychologically scarred from the events that went down in the previous chapter somewhat. She's very quiet. Even Joel's pointing out that she's not talking much.
I think for me, I interpreted that as not psychological about what's just happened, but more part of her, like having this internal battle of, I want to do this thing, I want to see out this journey, but at the same time, do I stop spending this time and having this relationship with Joel as soon as we get there? Like, I think she kind of is going back to that moment of, is this the moment where Joel walks away from me again? And Joel walks out? Like, is this that time again? And I think she kind of completely forgets that because of the giraffes and because of, the short section after that. It kind of leaves her completely. But there's definitely that section where you have to, like, she sat alone as you're trying to get her to jump up and grab the ladder, that you're like, hey, what's going on? Like, yeah.
Wait, I really just wanted to be like, another fucking ladder. Like, fuck. God, old age, these goddamn ladders. You make me climb them. Get the hell out of here. So eventually Joel has to put her ass into gear as you do another one of these silly ladder puzzles, which hopefully aren't or are very not much in the second game. And then when she gets up top, after she throws down the ladder for Joel, she starts chasing after something. What is it? Is it a monster? Is it a clicker? Is it a firefly? What is it? Joel chases after it, and it's revealed it's actually a giraffe on the outside walking past the building. And then you get obviously one of the most memorable moments in the game where you can stop the two of them pet the giraffe, and then you can just stay there for as long as you want and just watch these giraffes.
I stayed there for a good 5 minutes.
I think I did too.
Like, and I think it's part of me is playing this after, in a world where I've played both of the seasons of Life is Strange that give you...
I was going to say, because Life is Strange, all those moments, I just sit there for like 5 minutes as well.
It gives you, and it's kind of used to that, where you kind of sit there listening to the music and stuff. Like, I like, there's, for Life is Strange on a small town, like, there are songs in real life that I listen to now that I have a very emotional relationship with because of Life is Strange, because I connect it like that. So just in this moment to sit there and just look out with Ellie, and that's where my kind of cathartic feeling was coming from, was just, well, crap, this is the last time I really sit here and, the relationships feel so pure and so perfect for a moment between these two. And this is before everything kind of goes to shit and before Joel makes certain decisions. Like, this is just kind of, this is it.
It is funny to point that out, like in retrospect, because you obviously don't know it the first time you're playing it, but it is when you know how the game ends and everything that happens after this, that is literally the last time they have a moment together of just sitting somewhere and chilling. And obviously that's why the game lets you sit there and relax with that. However, I feel like there's two things. When I played it originally, these sorts of moments of just sitting there and just taking something in, I feel like I wasn't that kind of player, and I was more like, all right, let's keep going, let's get to the story, let's fucking go. But I definitely feel like either getting older or just like appreciating different things since I originally played it in games and movies and whatever else. All these sorts of moments now I just love and stuff, and especially as we mentioned, like the Life is Strange, because I take those moments in Life is Strange as just relax. Like there's a moment of peace in this game at the moment. Just chill, enjoy the music. The music's purposely chosen to sort of get you in a certain side of emotion. That's what the developers chose, and just sit there and chill out and have a think about what's happened and what could happen. And, you know, there's no rush. Just relax, stop chilling. So, yeah, if the second game weirdly added more moments like this, I wouldn't be complaining, I don't think. I don't know.
No,
because I quite enjoy them. So, yeah, after eventually when you leave, be it 10 seconds later, be it 5 minutes later, be it 10, whatever you decide to do, they begin moving down this stairwell, and it's at this moment that Joel asks Ellie and points out to Ellie that she doesn't actually have to do this. You know, they could just go back to Tommy's place, start a life, whatever. You know, no need to do it. And then Ellie responds by saying, "Yeah, but no, it can't be for nothing," which is sort of like a key sort of quote from the first game, obviously. And they continue on. They stop at this army medical setup, which is just outside the doors, where Ellie gives Joel the picture of Sarah Tommy had that she obviously stole. This time Joel thanks her for it, whereas he obviously shook it away when Tommy offered it, and then says something along the lines of, "You can never escape your past." So then they head on a bit further and they enter this underground section. They enter an underground section where there's a ton of infected, as I was just talking about, where you have to fight your way through, and there's clickers, bloaters, whole heap of stuff. Eventually they land on top of this bus, and then they're working their way across it. However, it begins to move because it's got this flow of water coming through this like sewage thing, I think is what I took it as, like some sort of waterway or something like that. And the bus gives way and begins moving down the rapids. Ellie has made it off at this point, and Joel gets thrown into the bus and he's stuck in it, but Ellie decides to jump back on top of the bus to help Joel escape, which she does help out. However, of course, Ellie cannot swim and she gets caught by the rapids and chucked underneath. Joel then swims out, grabs Ellie, comes up from the water on the other end. Luckily, they've through this whole process made it to where they actually needed to be. However, Ellie is not breathing for, so Joel attempts to give her CPR, and as he does, someone starts walking up to him, this dude with a gun. If you pay attention and you're looking, you can obviously see that he's got a Firefly emblem on him, which I don't know if Joel realizes that in the moment and that's why he keeps going, or he just doesn't care either way. I think obviously he doesn't care either way. I don't think Joel
looks up. I don't think Joel looks up at all through this moment. He knows that somebody's there.
Yeah, I just think he doesn't care.
He's just solely focusing on saving her, which I'm like, this guy's a douchebag for hitting him. Like, he's clearly trying to save somebody's life. Like, what the hell? I will say I did forget after this section, after you like escape from the area with all the infected, there is like hey, before we finish up the game, one more pallet and ladder section. And I'm like, you
it's so
jerks.
Pointless. I don't know.
Force feeding gameplay down my throat.
It is the most old school gameplay design where you play for that whole thing. You're like, why? This wasn't a hard puzzle. It wasn't even a puzzle. Anyway, we've talked about those silly things. So the Firefly guy, as Joel keeps trying to do it, eventually walks up, just smacks him in the head, and he goes unconscious. And that's where this chapter ends, and that's where this segment ends. And I mean, that's it. That's the game over. No, we've got one more section, of course. Next week, we'll be talking about the last 2 chapters, or chapter plus epilogue, however you want to go about wording it for yourself. So we will see you here next week in either Platinum Explosion, where you can listen to this segment first, or the YouTube version, which comes out a day later. In that, we'll talk about it then next week.